Some secrets don't stay buried, and some debts aren't paid in gold, they're paid in blood and shadows. They say the dead don't speak, but in the elite circles of New York, silence can be the loudest warning. Julian believed he had buried his secret along with the man he betrayed. He was wrong. Julian was a ruthless architect who rose to fame by stealing the life's work of his brilliant partner, Elias. To ensure Elias would never speak, Julian framed him for a crime he didn't commit, leaving him to rot in a desolate prison where he eventually died, broken and alone. Years later, Julian reached the pinnacle of his career, living in a glass penthouse overlooking Manhattan. But the air in his home began to grow cold. Strange symbols started appearing on his blueprints, the exact symbols Elias had used in his secret designs. Julian dismissed it as stress until the gifts began arriving. Every night, a Julian's smart home system played a recording of Elias's voice whispering, "The foundation is weak, Julian. It's all coming down." Terrified, Julian hired a top-tier security firm and a mysterious cleaner to uncover who was haunting him. They discovered the truth. Julian's own assistant, a girl he had trusted like a daughter, was Elias's secret heiress. She hadn't come for money. She had come for justice. She had enlisted a dark practitioner from her homeland to bind Elias's restless spirit to the very buildings Julian had stolen. Julian wasn't just losing his mind. The buildings themselves were cracking, as if the shadows of his betrayal were tearing the steel apart. In a final, desperate confrontation, Julian became trapped in his own masterpiece during a storm. Glass walls shattered inward, revealing a reflection not of himself, but of Elias' eyes hollow, burning with vengeance. The betrayal had come full circle. Julian didn't fall from the building. The building seemed to spit him out. The police found Julian's body in the wreckage of his shattered office. There was no sign of foul play. Only a single old blueprint clutched in his hand, the original design signed by Elias. Julian had the world, but in the end, the man he betrayed had claimed his soul. He stole a life, he stole a legacy, but some debts are paid in shadows. Julian thought he buried his secret with Elias, the man he betrayed. He was wrong. Julian, a ruthless architect, rose to fame by stealing his partner's brilliance. Elias, framed and broken, died alone in a desolate prison. Years later, Julian's glass penthouse loomed over Manhattan, but the air grew cold. Strange symbols appeared on his blueprints, Elias's secret designs. Then came the whispers. At 3 a.m., his smart home system played Elias's voice. "The foundation is weak, Julian. It's all coming down." Terrified, Julian hired the best. They discovered the truth. His trusted assistant was Elias's secret heiress. She hadn't come for money. She came for justice. She had bound Elias's restless spirit to Julian's stolen buildings. The skyscrapers began to crack, steel bending as if the city itself was punishing him. In a storm, Julian faced his own creation. Glass shattered around him. In the shards, he saw Elias' burning eyes, hollow and unforgiving. The betrayal came full circle. Julian didn't fall. The building expelled him. Julian's body lay in the wreckage, clutched in his hand, Elias's original blueprint. Julian had conquered the world, but Elias had claimed his soul. He stole a life. He stole a legacy. But ghosts don't forget. Julian thought he buried his secret with Elias. He was wrong. Once a ruthless architect, Julian stole his partner's genius and left him to die. Years later, his penthouse glittered over Manhattan, but the shadows of betrayal crept inside. Blueprints appeared overnight, etched with Elias's secret symbols. At 3 a.m., whispers echoed. "The foundation is weak. It's all coming down." His trusted assistant? Elias's hidden heiress. She didn't want money, she wanted justice. She summoned Elias's spirit to haunt every building Julian had stolen. Steel cracked, glass shattered. Julian's empire began to rot from within. During a storm, trapped in his own masterpiece, Julian saw it. Elias's eyes blazing in the shards. The ultimate betrayal. The building expelled him. Found in the wreckage, Julian clutched a single blueprint, Elias's original design. Julian had the world. Elias had his soul. Julian believed he had buried his secret, along with Elias, the man he had betrayed. He was wrong. Once a ruthless architect, Julian rose to fame by stealing his partner's brilliance, leaving Elias framed for a crime he didn't commit. Elias rotted in a desolate prison, broken, alone, and forgotten, until death came for him. But some spirits don't rest. Years later, Julian's empire gleamed over Manhattan. Glass penthouses, sky-high towers, awards, fame, fortune, power. Yet inside his own home, a creeping chill whispered through the walls. Symbols began appearing on his blueprints, intricate, precise, unmistakably Elias's designs. Julian laughed it off as stress. Then the whispers started. Every night, precisely at 3 a.m., his smart home system came alive with a voice he thought he'd silenced forever. "The foundation is weak, Julian. It's all coming down." Paranoia consumed him. He hired the best security teams, detectives, even a mysterious cleaner who claimed to know the dark arts. That's when he discovered the truth. His trusted assistant, the girl he'd mentored like a daughter, was actually Elias's secret heiress. She hadn't come for money. She had come for vengeance. Through rituals older than time, she had bound Elias's restless spirit to every building Julian had stolen, and the empire he had built on lies began to crumble. Steel bent, glass cracked, towers groaned as though the city itself had turned against him. Every blueprint, every structure, every corner of Manhattan that bore Julian's name carried the weight of a ghost's wrath. The storm came one fateful night, lightning slicing through the sky, wind battering glass panes. Julian found himself trapped inside his own masterpiece, a skyscraper of his own making. Walls shattered inward, and in the jagged shards, he didn't see himself. He saw Elias' hollow eyes burning with rage, a face twisted in betrayal. The police found Julian's body in the ruins of his shattered office. No foul play, no signs of struggle. Only a single blueprint clutched in his hand, the original design signed by Elias. Julian had conquered Manhattan. He had the world. But the man he betrayed had claimed his soul, and in the silence of the shattered city, the whisper remained. Some debts are never forgiven. Julian believed he had buried his secret with Elias, the man he had betrayed so ruthlessly. He was wrong. Julian had been a brilliant architect, but ambition burned hotter than conscience. In his pursuit of fame and fortune, he stole the life's work of his closest partner, Elias, a man whose genius had made the skyline of New York what it was. To ensure Elias would never speak, Julian framed him for a crime he did not commit, leaving him to rot in a remote, desolate prison. Bare, alone and broken, Elias died forgotten by the world, but never by the shadows. Years passed. Julian's name became legend. Glass towers stretched across Manhattan like steel and ambition incarnate. Awards, wealth, influence all at his fingertips. But one night, a chill brushed against his penthouse walls, unnatural and insistent. It began subtly, faint markings on his blueprints, tiny symbols he had never drawn, symbols only Elias had used in his secret designs. Julian dismissed them at first, blaming exhaustion, stress, paranoia. But the gifts began. Every night, at exactly his smart home system erupted with whispers, a voice he had silenced years ago. "The foundation is weak, Julian. It's all coming down." Fear clawed at his mind. He hired top-tier security investigators, even a mysterious cleaner rumored to have knowledge of dark arts. What they discovered chilled him to the core. Julian's most trusted assistant, a young woman he had treated like a daughter, was actually Elias's secret heiress. She had not come for money. She had come for justice. Through rituals older than memory, she had bound Elias's restless spirit to the buildings Julian had stolen. The effect was terrifyingly physical. Towers began to groan under invisible pressure. Glass cracked. Steel bent as though the city itself conspired against him. Every corner of Manhattan that bore Julian's name carried the wrath of a ghost's vengeance. His empire, built on stolen dreams, began to collapse. The storm came suddenly one night. Rain slammed against the glass of his penthouse. Lightning split the sky. Wind shattered windows. Trapped in the core of his masterpiece, Julian faced the ultimate reckoning. The glass walls exploded inward, and in the fragments, he didn't see his own reflection. He saw Elias. Hollow eyes burned with fury. The genius he had betrayed had returned, bound to the very city Julian had claimed as his own. The building, alive with vengeance, expelled him violently. When the police arrived, Julian's body lay among the ruins of his shattered office. There was no evidence of foul play, only one object clutched in his hand. A single old blueprint, the original design signed by Elias. Julian had conquered the world. He had fame, fortune, power, but the man he betrayed had claimed his soul. And even in the silence that followed, a whisper lingered across the city streets, down empty towers, in the shadows of every skyline. Some debts are never forgiven. Julian thought he had buried his secret with Elias. He was wrong. Once, Julian and Elias had been partners, architects whose genius could shape skylines. Julian, ruthless and ambitious, coveted fame and fortune more than friendship. When he realized Elias's brilliance outshone his own, he made a choice: steal, betray, and destroy. He framed Elias for a crime he didn't commit, leaving him to die alone in a desolate prison. The world forgot Elias, but shadows remember. Years later, Julian stood at the pinnacle of success. Manhattan stretched beneath him like a glittering crown. He had glass towers, awards, wealth, everything ambition promised. Yet the higher he rose, the colder his penthouse became. Strange symbols began appearing on his blueprints, intricate designs only Elias had known. Julian laughed nervously, blaming stress. But laughter faded when the whispers began. Every night, at precisely the voice of the dead infiltrated his home. "The foundation is weak, Julian. It's all coming down." Paranoia consumed him. He hired detectives, private security, even a mysterious cleaner with knowledge of the arcane. The truth shattered him. His most trusted assistant, the girl he had raised like a daughter, was Elias's secret heiress. She hadn't come for money. She had come for revenge. She had called upon an ancient practitioner to bind Elias's restless spirit to every building Julian had stolen, and the city itself began to fight back. Steel groaned, glass cracked, towers quivered as though alive. Julian's genius had become his curse. Every skyscraper, every blueprint, every corner of Manhattan bore the vengeance of the dead. The nights grew worse. Julian saw shadows move in the corner of his eye, felt cold hands brush against him in empty hallways, heard whispers in elevators, stairwells, even in the hum of fluorescent lights. The city's heartbeat became Elias's heartbeat. Julian couldn't sleep, he couldn't eat, he couldn't escape. His empire was dying around him, and he was powerless to stop it. Then came the storm. Lightning split the sky. Rain battered the glass of his penthouse. Wind howled like the cries of the betrayed. Julian became trapped in the heart of his crowning achievement, his masterpiece building. Walls of glass began to implode. Steel bent, shadows twisted. And then he saw it in the shards of reflection, not his own. Hollow, burning eyes. The face of the man he had destroyed. Julian's empire, his life, his fame all crumbled. The building seemed alive, pushing him, spitting him out. He fell, not into the streets below, but into oblivion itself, swallowed by the consequences of his betrayal. Aftermath. When the authorities arrived, there was no evidence of foul play. Only one object remained in Julian's hand: a blueprint, the original signed by Elias. Manhattan's skyline remained, but Julian's soul was claimed. He had conquered the world. He had everything, yet the man he betrayed now owned what mattered most, and the whispers lingered across the city, drifting through towers and streets, over steel and glass, into every corner of Manhattan. Some debts are never forgiven. Julian had believed that burying Elias would bury the past. He was wrong. Years ago, Julian and Elias were partners, two architects whose genius had shaped the skyline of New York. Julian, ambitious and ruthless, burned with a desire for fame and fortune. Elias, brilliant and principled, had nothing but loyalty and brilliance to offer. When Julian realized that Elias's genius outshone his own, he made a choice that would consume them both: betrayal. He stole Elias's designs, erased his name from every plan, and framed him for a crime he did not commit. Julian watched as Elias was dragged into a desolate prison, left to rot in isolation. There, alone, broken, and forgotten, Elias died. The world forgot him, but shadows remember. Shadows wait. Years later, Julian stood at the pinnacle of success. Manhattan sprawled beneath him, glittering with the towers he had built on stolen dreams. Awards, wealth, power, all within his grasp. But ambition often comes with a cost, and Julian was about to pay in ways he could never imagine. It started subtly. The air in his penthouse grew cold. Faint, intricate symbols appeared on his blueprints, symbols only Elias had ever used. Julian laughed, thinking exhaustion and paranoia were to blame. But then the whispers began. Every night his smart home system would play a voice he thought he had silenced forever. "The foundation is weak, Julian. It's all coming down." The voice became obsession. Julian's sleep vanished. His thoughts fragmented. Shadows moved at the corners of his vision. He began to see figures and reflections that weren't there. Every night, Elias spoke through the very walls of the building, whispering truths Julian had tried to bury. Desperation drove Julian to hire detectives, elite security teams, and a mysterious cleaner, rumored to have knowledge of dark and ancient arts. The truth that emerged shattered him. His assistant, the girl he had raised like a daughter, was Elias's secret heiress. She had come not for money, not for fame, but for justice. Through rituals older than memory, she had bound Elias's restless spirit to every building Julian had ever claimed. And the city itself became a prison. Towers groaned, steel twisted, and glass cracked as if the city were alive, turning against him. Julian's masterpieces became instruments of torment. Every corner of Manhattan, every street, every skyline bore the vengeance of the dead. The hauntings intensified. Julian saw shadows move through walls. Cold fingers brushed against him in empty hallways. Voices whispered from elevators, stairwells, and even the hum of fluorescent lights. His sanity began to unravel. Each step felt like walking on the edge of a knife. The buildings themselves seemed to breathe, to watch, to judge. Then came the storm. Thunder split the sky. Rain lashed against the penthouse. Wind screamed through the towers like the cries of the betrayed. Julian became trapped in his masterpiece building, a creation meant to immortalize him, now a living nightmare. Glass walls imploded. Steel beams bent and groaned. And in the shards of broken glass, he saw it, not his reflection, but Elias. Hollow eyes burned with fury, a face twisted by betrayal, a spirit that refused to rest. Julian's world collapsed around him. Towers groaned. The city shivered. And then the building, alive with Elias's wrath, expelled him violently. He fell, not to the streets below, but into a void of terror and consequence. His empire, built on deceit, had turned against him entirely. When the authorities arrived, there was no sign of foul play, no struggle. Only one object remained, a single blueprint, the original signed by Elias. Julian had conquered Manhattan. He had wealth, fame, and power, but he had lost his soul. The man he betrayed had claimed the only thing that mattered, and even in the silence of the shattered towers, the whisper remained, drifting through glass, steel, and shadow. Some debts are never forgiven. Julian thought he had buried the past. He was wrong. Years ago, Julian and Elias were partners, architects whose brilliance could shape skylines, but ambition burns hotter than loyalty, and Julian's burned hotter than most. He coveted fame, wealth, and power. Elias, his partner, was brilliant, principled, and loyal. When Julian realized Elias outshone him, he made a choice that would consume them both: betrayal. He stole Elias's designs, erased his name from every blueprint, and framed him for a crime he did not commit. Julian watched as Elias was dragged into a desolate prison, left to rot in isolation. Alone, broken, and forgotten, Elias died. But the world may have forgotten him. The shadows never do. Shadows wait. Shadows remember. Years later, Julian reached the peak of his ambition. Manhattan stretched beneath him in steel and glass. Towers he had built on stolen brilliance glittered in the sun. Awards, money, power all within his grasp. Yet in the penthouse he had designed to be a sanctuary, something insidious began to creep. It started subtly, a chill in the air, symbols appearing on blueprint symbols only Elias had ever used in his secret designs. Julian laughed nervously. Fatigue, stress, paranoia, surely that was the explanation. But the whispers came next. Every night, precisely the voice of the dead seeped into his home. The foundation is weak, Julian, it's all coming down. The voice became obsession. Julian's sleep vanished. Shadows moved at the corners of his vision. Reflections twisted in mirrors. Every night, Elias spoke through the very walls of Julian's empire. Desperation drove Julian to hire detectives, elite security teams, and a mysterious cleaner rumored to have knowledge of dark and ancient arts. The truth they uncovered shattered him. His assistant, the girl he had raised like a daughter, was Elias's secret heiress. She had come not for money, not for fame, but for vengeance. Through rituals older than memory, she had bound Elias's restless spirit to every building Julian had claimed, and the city itself became a prison. Towers groaned, steel twisted, glass cracked. Julian's masterpieces became instruments of torment. Every corner of Manhattan, every skyline bore the vengeance of the dead. The hauntings escalated. Julian saw shadows move in walls. Cold fingers brushed against him in empty hallways. Voices whispered from elevators, stairwells, even the hum of fluorescent lights. Each day, reality frayed. Each night, terror grew. Julian could not escape. The city had become alive, a reflection of Elias's wrath. Then came the storm. Thunder split the sky. Rain pounded against the penthouse. Wind shrieked through the towers like the cries of the betrayed. Julian was trapped in the heart of his greatest creation, a skyscraper, meant to immortalize him, now a living nightmare. Glass walls imploded. Steel beams bent. And in the shards, he saw not himself, but Elias. Hollow eyes burned with fury. Every betrayal, every stolen dream reflected back at him. The building itself seemed alive, pushing him, spitting him out. Julian fell. The city groaned. Towers shuddered. Glass shattered. His empire collapsed. His fame, fortune, and power meant nothing. The man he betrayed had returned through shadows, spirits, and vengeance. When authorities arrived, there was no sign of foul play. No struggle. Only one object remained, a blueprint, the original, signed by Elias. Manhattan's skyline still glittered, but Julian's soul had been claimed. He had conquered the world. Yet the man he betrayed now owned the one thing that truly mattered. Even in the silence of the shattered towers, the whisper remained, drifting through steel, glass, and shadow. Some debts are never forgiven.